The twin suns of the Horizon Prime colony cast long shadows across the research complex, their amber light filtering through reinforced crystal windows. Emily Thompson moved between holographic displays with the grace of someone far beyond her 12 years, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that would have challenged most adult researchers. Her latest project, a breakthrough in xenobiological adaptation, had caught the attention of multiple galactic research institutions. The Zarkon diplomatic mission was supposed to be a routine cultural exchange, a chance to demonstrate humanity's growing scientific prowess. No one expected it would become a turning point in human history. Emily's parents, Michael and Laura Thompson, were prominent xenoengineers who had dedicated their lives to understanding alien biology. Their daughter had inherited not just their intellect, but a profound curiosity that knew no boundaries. She stood barely 4 feet tall, but her mind was a universe of potential, her neural implants allowing her to process complex biological algorithms faster than entire research teams. The Zarkon delegation arrived with typical imperial pomp, massive biomechanical beings that towered over the human researchers. Their exoskeletal frames gleamed with intricate circuitry, each movement a calculated display of technological superiority. Ambassador Krelax, a senior diplomat with centuries of galactic negotiation experience, looked down at Emily with what could only be described as clinical disdain. "Fascinating specimen," Krelax muttered to his attaché, his translation matrix converting his native clicks and whistles into crisp English. Primitive biological systems attempting complex research. Emily didn't flinch. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Her latest research proposed a revolutionary method of cellular adaptation that could potentially solve multiple interspecies medical challenges. The paper she was about to present could change everything. A bridge between human understanding and galactic medical science. The conference hall buzzed with tension. Researchers from a dozen different human colonies watched carefully. This was more than a scientific presentation. It was a statement of human potential. Emily's holographic display came to life, showing intricate molecular structures that danced and transformed, illustrating her groundbreaking theories. "The key to xenobiological adaptation," Emily began, her voice steady and clear, "lies not in forcing compatibility, but in understanding the fundamental communication between cellular structures." Her presentation was flawless. Complex biological algorithms mapped out potential solutions to cross-species medical challenges that had stumped researchers for decades. The human observers watched with pride, the alien delegates with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed condescension. Ambassador Krelax listened, his sensory arrays scanning every molecular detail of Emily's presentation. What humans saw as a brilliant scientific breakthrough, the Zarkon saw as a potential threat. Their galactic empire had maintained supremacy through careful control of technological and biological innovation. In that moment, something changed. A subtle movement, almost imperceptible to human eyes. Krelax's neural interface activated, sending a coded signal that would alter everything. The first indication came as a slight shimmer in the air. Emily's parents saw it first, a quantum disruption that human sensors could barely detect. Michael Thompson's hand began to move, a warning forming on his lips. He was too late. A focused quantum pulse erupted from the ambassador's neural implant. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. To the Zarkon, it was a simple correction, a method of neutralizing a potential future threat. To humanity, it was murder. Emily collapsed instantly. No blood, no visible trauma. Her neural systems simply stopped. The quantum pulse had systematically dismantled her brain's complex neural network, reducing a brilliant young mind to nothing more than biological matter. The conference hall went silent. Michael and Laura Thompson watched, frozen in horror, as their daughter, the future of human scientific understanding, was erased in less than a millisecond. The Zarkon delegation remained impassive. To them, this was a routine administrative action. A potential threat had been neutralized. Ambassador Krelax didn't even acknowledge the act, continuing to process Emily's presentation data as if nothing had happened. But something fundamental had changed. In that moment of cold, calculated destruction, the Zarkon had made a catastrophic mistake. They had not just killed a child. They had awakened a sleeping giant. Humanity would remember, and humanity would respond. The Rocky Mountain Containment Facility was more than a military installation. It was a testament to humanity's most classified and ambitious genetic engineering project, a secret so deep that even the highest levels of government only knew fragments of its existence. 16 cryo chambers stood in perfect alignment, each a marvel of quantum-locked preservation technology. Liquid helium circulated through microscopic channels, maintaining cellular structures with impossible precision. These were not mere soldiers. They were the Prometheus Project, humanity's ultimate evolutionary experiment. Jack Reese opened his eyes first. The neural reboot was instantaneous. Millions of nanite clusters in his brain activated, reconnecting synaptic pathways that had been frozen for decades. His augmented vision swept the facility, quantum-enhanced optics rendering the environment in hyper-detailed spectrums invisible to ordinary human perception. Around him, the other 15 members of the Omega team began to stir. Each was a unique variation of human potential, genetically optimized, cybernetically enhanced, psychologically conditioned to be the perfect warriors. They were more than human, yet fundamentally human in their core motivation. Dr. Rebecca Winters, the lead scientist who had originally conceived the Prometheus Project, watched from a secure observation room. Her hands trembled slightly as she monitored their awakening. These soldiers represented decades of forbidden research, genetic manipulation that had walked the razor's edge of ethical boundaries. Activation sequence confirmed. She whispered into her quantum-encrypted communication device. Omega team is online. Jack Reese's first conscious thought wasn't of his own awakening, but of the mission data flooding his neural interface. The death of Emily Thompson wasn't just information. It was a molecular-level imperative that burned through his enhanced consciousness. Revenge wasn't an emotion for these soldiers. It was a calculated response, a systemic correction to a fundamental violation. Each soldier's body was a living weapon system. Jack's muscular structure wasn't just enhanced, it was a dynamically adaptive biomechanical marvel. Muscle fibers could instantly reconfigure, increasing density and strength by 700% in milliseconds. His skeleton was a carbon-titanium composite that could absorb and redistribute kinetic energy with impossible efficiency. The other team members displayed similar extraordinary capabilities. Maria Rodriguez, the team's tactical specialist, had a neural interface that could simultaneously process multiple combat scenarios faster than any known computer. Her brain could simulate millions of potential tactical outcomes in the time it took a normal human to blink. David Chen, the team's technical warfare expert, was already interfacing with the facility's computer systems. His cybernetic implants weren't just communication devices. They were living hacking tools that could penetrate any known digital security system. Full system diagnostic complete. David's voice was a perfect blend of human tone and machine precision. Prometheus protocol is active. All systems functioning at 99.8% optimal capacity. The facility itself was a marvel of hidden technology. Quantum-shielded walls prevented any external scanning. Multiple redundant power systems, including a miniature fusion reactor buried deep within the mountain, ensured complete operational independence. This wasn't just a military installation. It was humanity's ultimate insurance policy. Dr. Winters continued her observations. These soldiers were more than a military project. They represented humanity's potential for adaptation, for survival against impossible odds. Each had been carefully selected, not just for physical capabilities, but for psychological resilience. Jack Reese completed his initial system check and turned to face the observation window. His enhanced vision could see through the supposedly opaque glass, making direct eye contact with Dr. Winters. "Mission parameters," he asked. The question wasn't just a request for information. It was a complex quantum-encrypted communication that would transmit multiple layers of strategic analysis simultaneously. The data about Emily Thompson's murder downloaded directly into their collective consciousness, not just the facts, but the emotional context, the violation, the potential future that had been erased. 16 pairs of eyes synchronized, 16 enhanced bodies tensed with a singular purpose. The Prometheus project was awake, and the galaxy would soon understand what that meant. The Terran Confederation transformed overnight. What had been a diplomatic, research-driven society became a precision instrument of calculated vengeance. Emergency sessions of the global government convened within hours of Emily Thompson's murder, with military and civilian leadership unified by a single burning purpose. Jack Reese stood before the holographic War Council, his augmented body a stark contrast to the traditional military and political leaders. His presence alone communicated volumes. He was a weapon that had been waiting, perfected, and patient. The Zarkon Empire believes they eliminated a potential threat. Jack began, his voice a controlled instrument of strategy. They've instead initiated a conflict they cannot comprehend. Quantum-encrypted displays materialized around the council chamber. Detailed schematics of Zarkon military infrastructure, diplomatic networks, and technological vulnerabilities appeared. These weren't just intelligence reports. They were living, adaptive analysis maps that shifted and recalculated in real time. Maria Rodriguez stepped forward, her tactical interface projecting multiple potential invasion scenarios. Each projection was a complex web of potential outcomes, calculated with impossible precision. Where traditional military strategists might see chaos, she saw a mathematical symphony of potential actions and counteractions. Their military doctrine relies on centralized command structures, Maria explained. We don't just attack. We systematically dismantle their entire operational framework. David Chen's cybernetic systems were already penetrating Zarkon communication networks. What would take traditional hackers months of work, he accomplished in milliseconds. Firewalls, quantum encryption, biological authentication systems, they were nothing more than simple puzzles to his enhanced neural interfaces. The other Omega team members prepared in their own specialized ways. Some underwent intensive biomechanical recalibration, their bodies literally redesigning themselves for optimal combat efficiency. Others interfaced with advanced weapon systems that blurred the line between technology and living organism. Outside the military facilities, human society underwent its own transformation. Research institutions that had previously focused on peaceful exploration now redirected their efforts toward military innovation. Universities suspended standard curricula, with entire academic departments mobilizing to support the coming conflict. Emily Thompson's scientific papers became more than academic documents. They were studied, dissected, and transformed into potential weapons of both destruction and defense. Her unfinished research on xenobiological adaptation became a blueprint for understanding and counteracting alien technologies. The global economic system shifted. Resource allocation, manufacturing, communication networks, everything was optimized for the coming conflict. It wasn't panic. It was a cold, calculated response that demonstrated humanity's unique ability to rapidly adapt. Jack Reese watched these preparations with a detached, analytical perspective. The Omega team wasn't just a military unit. They were the tip of a much larger, more complex human response. Each of them represented decades of genetic research, psychological conditioning, and technological innovation. We are not seeking destruction, Jack told the War Council. We are delivering a message. The Zarkon Empire will understand that humanity is not a species to be casually dismissed. Weapon systems that had been theoretical became rapidly developed prototypes. Quantum entanglement communication networks, adaptive camouflage technologies, biomechanical assault platforms that could transform battlefield environments. Each innovation was a testament to human creativity and resilience. The first phase of their strategy wasn't about massive military engagement. It was about precision. Surgical strikes that would systematically undermine the Zarkon Empire's ability to wage war. They would attack not just physical infrastructure, but the very psychological foundations of the alien civilization. Maria's tactical projections showed multiple potential conflict scenarios. In some, humanity suffered significant losses. In others, they emerged victorious. But in every scenario, one thing remained constant: the absolute determination of the human response. David Chen's final preparations involved creating adaptive communication viruses that would penetrate Zarkon networks. These weren't simple computer viruses. They were living information systems that could learn, adapt, and systematically dismantle alien communication infrastructure. As the preparations reached their final stages, Jack Reese looked at his team. 16 enhanced humans, 16 living weapons, 16 representatives of humanity's potential. The Prometheus project was ready, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first strike came without warning. Zarkon military installations across 3 star systems simultaneously experienced catastrophic system failures. What appeared to be random technological collapses were anything but random. They were a perfectly orchestrated symphony of destruction. Jack Reese led the primary assault team, dropping from subspace with impossible precision. Their assault vehicle wasn't a traditional spacecraft, but a living adaptive technology that could phase through standard defensive systems. Quantum dampening fields made them essentially invisible to conventional detection methods. Maria Rodriguez was the tactical architect of the assault. Her neural interface simultaneously managed 16 different combat scenarios, each calculated and recalculated in microseconds. Where traditional military strategists saw individual targets, she saw an interconnected system of vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited. The primary target was the Zarkon Central Communications Hub on Epsilon Gamma, a massive orbital installation that served as the primary nerve center for their entire military communication network. It was a fortress designed to withstand direct nuclear bombardment, protected by multiple layers of quantum shielding and adaptive defense systems. David Chen had already penetrated their systems weeks before the physical assault. What the Zarkon believed was a secure network was actually a carefully constructed trap. Every communication channel, every security protocol was subtly compromised, waiting for the precise moment of activation. As the Omega team approached, David's neural interfaces began the digital assault. Firewalls dissolved like tissue paper. Security protocols turned against themselves. The most advanced communication systems in the known galaxy became nothing more than an elaborate illusion of security. Jack's team moved with superhuman precision. Their augmented bodies defied traditional human limitations. Gravity was a suggestion. Reaction times were measured in nanoseconds. Each team member was a living weapon system that could adapt to changing combat environments faster than any known biological or technological entity. The first physical breach came almost as an afterthought. Quantum phase charges created microscopic tears in the station's defensive systems. These weren't explosions in any traditional sense. They were precise molecular disruptions that systematically dismantled structural integrity. Maria's tactical overlay showed the cascading consequences of each action. A communications relay destroyed here would cause a chain reaction of logistical failures there. A structural weakness exploited in one section would create a domino effect of systemic collapse. Zarkon defense systems responded, but they were fighting an enemy they couldn't comprehend. Defensive turrets tracked movement that wasn't there. Quantum shields attempted to block attacks that existed in multiple probability states simultaneously. It was like watching a complex chess match where one player could move pieces outside the traditional rules of the game. David Chen's most brilliant contribution was psychological. As the physical assault progressed, he introduced subtle information viruses into the Zarkon communication networks. These weren't simple computer viruses, but adaptive information systems that could learn, modify, and propagate. The Zarkon soldiers found their own communication systems turning against them. Orders became garbled. Strategic information became meaningless. The most advanced military communication network in the galaxy devolved into chaos. Jack moved through the station like a quantum ghost. His augmented body could absorb and redistribute kinetic energy, making traditional weapons almost useless. Zarkon soldiers found their most advanced weapons creating nothing more than momentary light shows against his adaptive combat suit. 1 hour into the assault, the entire Epsilon Gamma communications hub was completely neutralized. No massive explosions, no traditional destruction, just a systematic, precise dismantling of an entire military infrastructure. As they prepared to extract, Maria's tactical interface provided a final analysis. The assault hadn't just destroyed a military installation. It had sent a message that would resonate across the entire Zarkon Empire. Humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. Jack Reese looked at his team. 16 enhanced humans who had just demonstrated capabilities beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their first strike was complete. And this was just the beginning. The Zarkon High Council convened in their most secure chamber, a massive spherical room suspended within the quantum-locked heart of their primary administrative planet. Holographic displays flickered with real-time data from across their galactic holdings, each report more alarming than the last. Supreme Executor Krulax stood at the center of the chamber, his biomechanical form casting intricate shadows across the neural reactive surfaces. The destruction of the Epsilon Gamma communications hub was more than a military setback. It was an existential threat that challenged everything the Zarkon Empire believed about their galactic supremacy. "The human response is not random," announced Admiral Vornak, his sensory tendrils processing multiple data streams simultaneously. "This is a calculated dismantling of our infrastructure." Intelligence reports streamed in from multiple sectors. Human assets were moving with a precision that defied conventional military doctrine. Where the Zarkon expected massive fleet movements, they found surgical strikes that targeted the most vulnerable points of their technological infrastructure. The quantum-encrypted communication networks that had been the backbone of Zarkon military superiority were now compromised. Each transmission carried the potential of infiltration, each communication channel a possible trap. Their most secure systems had become liabilities. Maria Rodriguez watched these developments from the Terran Confederation's primary strategic command center. Her neural interface processed the Zarkon responses in real time, predicting their moves with mathematical precision. To her, the galactic conflict was nothing more than an elaborate multi-dimensional chess match. "They're predictable," she muttered to Jack Reese, multiple holographic displays dancing around her enhanced perception. "Their hierarchical structure creates inherent vulnerabilities that they can't even see." The Zarkon military began mobilizing their primary battle fleets. Massive ships that had once been the undisputed masters of galactic conflict now seemed like lumbering dinosaurs against the humans' adaptive warfare. Each fleet movement was anticipated. Each strategic decision was already countered before it could be implemented. David Chen's information warfare reached new levels of complexity. The viruses he had introduced into Zarkon systems were now self-evolving entities. They didn't just disrupt communication. They actively created false intelligence, sending Zarkon military units on wild goose chases across multiple star systems. On the diplomatic front, the human response was equally sophisticated. The Terran Confederation began reaching out to other galactic civilizations, sharing carefully curated information about the Zarkon's unprovoked murder of Emily Thompson. What had been a localized conflict was rapidly becoming a broader galactic narrative. Supreme Executor Krulax realized too late that they were fighting an enemy that didn't follow any known rules of engagement. Human warfare wasn't about territorial conquest or resource acquisition. It was a systemic response to a fundamental violation, the murder of a child who represented humanity's potential. Jack Reese oversaw the strategic implementation with a detached, analytical perspective. Each action was carefully calculated to achieve maximum psychological impact. They weren't just destroying Zarkon military capabilities, they were systematically dismantling the very concept of Zarkon galactic supremacy. The quantum-adaptive weapon systems developed by human research teams proved to be game-changers. weapons that could exist in multiple probability states, communication systems that could learn and adapt faster than any known technological entity. These were not just military innovations. They were a fundamental reimagining of warfare itself. Maria's tactical projections showed multiple potential scenarios. In some, the conflict escalated to total galactic war. In others, the Zarkon Empire collapsed under its own technological and psychological vulnerabilities. But in every scenario, humanity emerged as a transformative force. "They still don't understand," David Chen observed, watching the Zarkon's increasingly desperate communication attempts. "They're fighting the war they expected to fight, not the war we're actually waging." As the galactic chessboard continued to shift, one thing became increasingly clear. The Zarkon Empire was facing an enemy they could never have anticipated. Humanity had transformed from a seemingly minor galactic civilization to a force of systemic, adaptive warfare. The message was clear: harm one human, and you risk the collective response of an entire species. And the Zarkon were about to learn that lesson in the most profound way possible. Emily Thompson's story became a weapon more powerful than any physical armament. David Chen transformed her scientific papers, personal recordings, and academic achievements into a multidimensional information campaign that penetrated every communication channel in Zarkon space. It wasn't just propaganda. It was a carefully constructed narrative that challenged the very foundations of the alien empire's cultural assumptions. The holographic broadcasts began simultaneously across thousands of Zarkon communication networks. Emily appeared not as a victim, but as a symbol of human potential. Her scientific research, the work that had been cut short, was presented in its full revolutionary context. Detailed simulations showed the potential medical breakthroughs she would have achieved, the lives she could have saved across multiple species. Maria Rodriguez managed the psychological operations with the same precision she applied to military tactics. Each transmission was a carefully calculated piece of a larger strategic puzzle. The goal wasn't just to generate sympathy, it was to fundamentally alter the Zarkon population's perception of humanity. Jack Reese watched the information campaign with a clinical eye. Where traditional military leaders might have seen this as a soft approach, he understood the profound strategic implications. Psychological warfare was about destroying an enemy's will to fight long before the first physical battle began. The Zarkon found themselves confronting a narrative they couldn't comprehend. Emily's story was packaged in a way that highlighted the fundamental differences between human and Zarkon cultures. Her curiosity, her compassion, her potential. These were weapons more devastating than any physical assault. Quantum encrypted data streams carried her story into the most secure Zarkon communication networks. Advanced translation algorithms ensured that every nuance was perfectly communicated, bypassing linguistic and cultural barriers. Her scientific papers were presented not just as academic documents, but as living testaments to human innovation. David Chen's most brilliant innovation was the adaptive narrative technology. The information campaign could modify itself in real time, responding to Zarkon counterarguments before they could even be fully formulated. Each attempt to suppress the message only amplified its reach. Within weeks, cracks began to appear in the Zarkon social structure. Lower-level administrators and research personnel started questioning the leadership's actions. The murder of a child prodigy became a focal point of internal dissent. The psychological assault went beyond simple information transmission. Maria's team created complex simulation models that showed the potential futures lost by Emily's murder. Advanced holographic technologies allowed Zarkon citizens to experience, almost live, the potential contributions she would have made to galactic science and medicine. Jack understood that true warfare was fought on multiple fronts. Physical battles were won and lost in moments. Psychological battles could reshape entire civilizations. The Omega team's approach was ruthlessly intelligent. They didn't just attack the Zarkon military, they systematically dismantled their cultural narrative of superiority. Each transmission carried multiple layers of meaning, each holographic presentation a precision-guided information weapon. Research institutions across Zarkon space found themselves bombarded with detailed information about Emily's work. Her unfinished research on cynobiological adaptation became a global conversation, challenging fundamental assumptions about scientific progress and ethical boundaries. David Chen's adaptive information systems could track and analyze the psychological impact in real time. They could see the moment doubt began to spread, the precise point where the Zarkon's internal narrative started to fracture. The most secure communication networks became conduits of their own destruction. Information that was meant to be suppressed found ways to propagate, creating cascading waves of internal questioning and doubt. Jack Reese recognized this for what it was, a fundamental reimagining of warfare. They weren't just fighting a military conflict. They were conducting the systemic dismantling of an entire civilization's psychological infrastructure. As the information campaign reached its peak, the Zarkon leadership found themselves fighting an enemy they could not comprehend. Physical weapons were useless against a narrative that cut to the core of their cultural beliefs. Emily Thompson, the child they had murdered, had become their most devastating weapon. The psychological warfare had only just begun. The final battle erupted around the primary Zarkon homeworld of Kralzin Prime, a planet-sized fortress that had never known defeat in 3,000 years of galactic conflict. Jack Reese and his Omega team dropped from subspace like quantum ghosts, their assault vectors defying every known law of traditional warfare. The massive defense platforms that surrounded the planet, each capable of obliterating entire battle groups, found themselves facing an enemy that existed simultaneously in multiple probability states. Maria Rodriguez's tactical interface transformed the entire assault into a living, breathing mathematical equation. Where traditional military strategists saw chaos, she saw a perfectly calculated system of interconnected vulnerabilities. Each movement, each attack was a precisely orchestrated dance of destruction. The first wave of Zarkon defenders disappeared before they could even register a threat. Quantum phase weapons developed by human research teams created microscopic tears in the fabric of spatial temporal defensive systems. These weren't explosions in any traditional sense. They were precise molecular disruptions that systematically dismantled entire defensive networks. David Chen's information warfare reached its ultimate expression. The communication networks that had been the backbone of Zarkon military power now worked against them. Defense protocols became nonsensical strings of corrupted data. Tactical systems turned against themselves in cascading failures of logic. Jack moved through the battlefield like a living weapon system. His augmented body absorbed energy weapons that would vaporize entire battalions. Kinetic barriers that had stopped conventional attacks became meaningless against his adaptive combat systems. Each movement was a calculated response, each action a demonstration of humanity's ultimate potential. The Zarkon Supreme Executor, Kralax, watched from the central command hub of Kralzin Prime. The massive holographic displays showed something impossible, a small team of humans systematically dismantling the most advanced military infrastructure in known space. "This is not possible," Kralax muttered, biomechanical sensory tendrils struggling to process the unfolding disaster. But it was happening. Maria's tactical overlay showed the battle from multiple dimensional perspectives. Each Zarkon defensive action was already countered before it could be fully implemented. Their most advanced strategic algorithms became nothing more than predictable patterns to be exploited. The Omega team moved with a synchronicity that defied individual human limitations. They were 16 bodies moving as a single adaptive organism. Where one soldier encountered resistance, another would instantaneously adapt, creating a fluid combat system that was more than the sum of its individual parts. Massive defense platforms that had stood as invincible bastions of Zarkon military might began to crumble, not through brute force, but through a systematic dismantling of their fundamental operational logic. David Chen's adaptive viruses turned the most secure communication networks into conduits of their own destruction. Jack Reese led a direct assault on the central command hub. His team moved through spatial temporal distortions that made traditional defense systems obsolete. Quantum-locked combat suits allowed them to exist in multiple states simultaneously, here and not here, attacking from angles that shouldn't exist. The final confrontation wasn't just a physical battle. It was a fundamental challenge to the Zarkon's entire concept of warfare, of technological superiority, of their place in the galactic hierarchy. As they approached the central command hub, holographic displays throughout the Zarkon defensive network began displaying images of Emily Thompson. Her scientific papers, her potential, her unfinished work became a psychological weapon more devastating than any physical assault. Supreme Executor Krelax realized too late that they were facing an enemy that didn't play by any known rules of engagement. Humanity had transformed warfare into something the Zarkon could never have anticipated. A living, adaptive system of total conflict. The central command hub of Krells Prime began to dissolve, not through conventional destruction, but through a systematic dismantling of its fundamental operational logic. Jack Reese stood at the center of the chaos, a living testament to humanity's potential. 16 enhanced humans had just demonstrated capabilities that would reshape galactic understanding forever. The message was clear: harm one human, and you risk the collective response of an entire species. The ultimate confrontation was complete. The aftermath of the conflict reshaped the entire galactic political landscape. Jack Reese stood before the Interstellar Diplomatic Council, the 16 members of the Omega team arrayed behind him like a living monument to human potential. Representatives from hundreds of different species watched with a mixture of awe, fear, and unprecedented respect. The Zarkon Empire no longer existed as a unified political entity. What had once been a monolithic galactic power had fragmented into isolated systems, their once impenetrable infrastructure now a shattered memory. The psychological impact of their defeat went far beyond military conquest. It was a fundamental dismantling of their entire cultural narrative of superiority. Dr. Rebecca Winters presented the scientific findings that would become the foundation of a new galactic understanding. Emily Thompson's unfinished research, the work that had been brutally cut short, now became the cornerstone of a revolutionary approach to interspecies cooperation and scientific understanding. Maria Rodriguez managed the diplomatic transition with the same precision she had applied to military strategy. Each negotiation, each diplomatic encounter was a carefully calculated interaction that demonstrated humanity's newfound galactic significance. David Chen's information systems had transformed the communication networks of multiple species. What had been a tool of war now became a platform for unprecedented cultural and scientific exchange. The adaptive technologies developed during the conflict found peaceful applications that would reshape scientific understanding for generations. The memorial to Emily Thompson became more than just a tribute. It was a galactic institution, a research center that brought together the most brilliant minds from hundreds of different species. Her unfinished work became a living testament to the potential of scientific curiosity and cross-species collaboration. Jack Reese understood that true victory wasn't about military conquest. It was about fundamentally changing the galactic narrative. The Omega team had become more than soldiers. They were ambassadors of a new way of understanding interspecies relationships. The technological innovations developed during the conflict began to find peaceful applications. Quantum adaptive medical technologies developed to counter Zarkon weapons now offered unprecedented possibilities for treating diseases across multiple species. Adaptive communication systems broke down linguistic and cultural barriers in ways no one had previously imagined. Supreme Executor Krelax, now a diplomatic refugee, found himself testifying before multiple galactic tribunals. The murder of Emily Thompson became a landmark case in interstellar law, establishing unprecedented protections for developing species and scientific researchers. The Terran Confederation emerged not as a military power, but as a transformative force in galactic civilization. Where other species saw conquest, humans demonstrated a unique approach to problem-solving that combined technological innovation with profound empathy. Maria's diplomatic analyses showed how humanity had fundamentally altered the galactic power structure. It wasn't through military might, but through a unique approach to innovation, adaptation, and cross-species understanding. The Omega team became legendary, not as warriors, but as pioneers. Each member found new ways to apply their enhanced capabilities to solving the most complex challenges facing the galactic community. Their augmented bodies and minds became tools of diplomacy, scientific research, and cultural exchange. David Chen's information networks became the foundation of a new galactic communication infrastructure. The adaptive technologies developed during the conflict now facilitated unprecedented levels of cultural and scientific exchange. Emily Thompson's research center became a symbol of hope and potential. Young researchers from hundreds of different species studied her unfinished work, continuing the legacy of a child whose potential had been brutally cut short. Jack Reese reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The revenge for a single child had reshaped the entire galactic understanding of humanity's potential. What had begun as a response to a terrible tragedy had become something far more profound. The memorial stood as a testament to their journey. A holographic display of Emily Thompson's final research continuously played, surrounded by adaptive displays that showed the ongoing scientific discoveries inspired by her work. "We are not defined by our ability to destroy," Jack told a group of young researchers from multiple species. "We are defined by our capacity to understand, to grow, to transform." The galaxy would never be the same, and it all began with the memory of a single child.